Hello, everyone. Welcome to Homes England's Autumn Learning Programme. And today's session, we're looking at how Homes England works with local leaders and partners to deliver housing-led mixed-use regeneration in the south of England and London. I'm Neil Hook. I am the Director for South and London for Homes England. And we'll run through some slides. Today and through to next steps. So the Local Government Capacity Centre, and you may have attended these sessions before, but it is part of the agency that develops and designs accessible local government and partner learning. That's not just for local government and public sector partners, but also for our private sector partners who want to learn more about what we do and how we do it and how they can access our funds and how we work with places. So we have quite a comprehensive learning offer. These cover our regular learning programs, and not just this year, but we also put all of our previous recordings up on YouTube. So by all means, access our YouTube channel and see some of those quite exciting presentations and useful presentations. We also have a housing information hub, which contains lots of house building, placemaking, regeneration information to support. I can attest it is incredibly useful, having used it only myself last week on public subsidy regulation. So I would actively encourage you to go and have a look at that. Similarly, we have fact sheets on new homes fact sheets to allow starters in this industry to get up to speed with things, and a capacity analysis tool to be able to understand capacity within local authorities as we start to move towards more locally led regeneration. So I'd actively encourage you to use those resources and make use of the information we can, and to reach out to us about future learning that you'd like to see or would find useful. So moving forward to today's agenda, we will run through and I'll run a brief overview of Homes England's place-based offer and how we work with local authorities, with public sector partners, or with private sector partners in a place-based way, particularly in light of devolution and the forthcoming white paper. We'll then move over to colleagues at Barking Riverside, who will walk through that project with us, and then we'll have a Q&A, both from both sides, those who are working on the project directly, Matt Carpen and Rachel Hickman, and then those within the agency who've been working on the project with Duncan and Wasim. We'll then move over to Bristol Temple Quarter, where we'll hopefully be joined by Stephen Peacock, Chief Executive of the Combined Authority, Rosa from the Homes England team, and Karen, our Chief Executive of Bristol Temple Quarter LLP, to walk through what the agency is doing within that quite unique framework. We'll then do a Q&A with the speakers there, and we'll finish up before 12 o'clock today. So for those who weren't on the call at the beginning, I'm Homes England's Director for the South and London, covering our Markets Partners and Places Directorate, working across the agency and public sector to deliver in this space. So Homes England is at its heart a locally led and locally based regeneration and housing delivery agency. We're an arm's length agency from government and the delivery bridge between central government and local places. We are committed to the devolution of power to local leadership, and we're based on the principle that the best outcomes for places are achieved when those who know and those who are involved at a local level are taking control and taking leadership. The agency's job is to facilitate that. There are some solutions that we can bring to the table that others can't, that sit within a national agency but should be delivered at a local level. We work to develop a pipeline of opportunities, and that pipeline of opportunities works both to understand the market, things that are coming through and the opportunities that exist, but also then to build a potential program of funding and delivery with local partners and with local stakeholders in that space. The agency's role is to ensure that strategically important projects are delivered, the projects that shift the regional and local dial, and we work with our local communities, with our local partners, and with local stakeholders to make that happen and ensure it happens in the right way to deliver the best outcomes for local places. So place-based working is a term that we've used for a number of years, but is particularly relevant now as we look forward to the publication of the devolution white paper. And the agency continues to offer broad support to everywhere in England. We work across and offer that, the affordable housing programme and general support through things like the local government capacity centre to provide support to every local authority and every partner in England. However, we focus our most intensive effort on regeneration and housing in specific places with unique challenges, places where we can helpfully and unlock significant housing, significant regeneration, and improve the life opportunities for residents in that area. We provide a single joined up packages of support to local leaders to help bring that together and work that and bring forward the opportunities that exist within local communities. We do that in two particular ways. Homes England works with local leadership to identify opportunities through continuous market engagement for investment and unblocking through the agency. We do that in a place-based way, looking at the priorities and looking where the agency can work most effectively and more effectively to deliver. We also work with mayoral combined authorities through strategic place partnerships. The current devolution framework names these as level 4 devolution deals, including trailblazers. So those are Greater Manchester, West Midlands, and other areas, mayoral combined authorities. These strategic place partnerships brings together the leadership teams of both the combined authority and Homes England to deliver in a locally led place-based way for the entire combined authority region. This is under the current devolution framework, and we very much expect that to continue and be emphasised in the new devolution white paper. The agency is focused on these place-based opportunities and place-based interventions to unlock growth at scale. So the first of these we'd like to discuss is Barking Riverside, and I'd like to introduce Matt Carpen, the Managing Director of Barking Riverside Limited, and Rachel Hickman, the Co-Chair of Barking Riverside from the Greater London Authority. Matt and Rachel, if you're happy to put your cameras on, we'll leave them to take you through a presentation talking you through the background to Barking and some details on it before we move on to Homes England's team with Duncan and Wasim, who'll talk to you about how the agency has supported Barking Riverside. The aspiration for all of these presentations is for you to be able to see what the agency does and understand it in light of your projects and your areas, and then be able to come back to us and say, well, I've learned this, what can I do in my area? So please bear that in mind when we go through the presentations. Matt, Rachel, over to you.
Thanks, Neil. Can you see me and hear me all right? Just want to check. Yeah, great. And firstly, thanks for inviting us to speak. Homes England is a major investor at Barking Riverside, and I'm going to take you through an introduction to the project, and alongside Rachel, who is my co-chair of the board, we're going to give you a bit of detail on where we're investing your money, what it's doing in both a local but also a London context. So Rachel will pick up the London context. But to start with, I will take you through exactly what the project is, and then we're delighted to be here to take any questions. So we'll pick those up at the end. So I'll get into the presentation. So firstly, my name is Matt Carpen. I'm the Managing Director at Barking Riverside, and I was for many years I've been in London, working in London for the last 20 years for the former mayor Ken Livingstone and then Boris Johnson, and then I moved here about 10 years ago to focus on investment in East London and the opportunity at Barking Riverside. Next slide, please. And just to set out what the partnership is, it's a joint venture between the Mayor of London and L&Q. L&Q is one of the largest housing associations in the UK, and alongside the Mayor is investing in strategic infrastructure and place to be able to unlock 20,000 homes in East London. And you'll see Homes England badged there as a major funder of the project, and we'll get into some of the detail of what funding has gone into the company. But you can also see Barking and Dagenham Council, Transport for London and Uber Boats by Thames Clipper. Those are also important partners of ours, all three of which are also investing in the infrastructure in this area of East London. So generally, this is quite a, although a simple structure, is such a partnership-based approach to delivery. And Barking Riverside is the master developer, and so although we don't deliver directly the homes, we're coordinating the homes, and I'll explain how that works in terms of the plot delivery as we go through the slides. Next slide, please. So if you didn't know where it was, and you may not be necessarily familiar with London development, this is East London, and East London proper East London. This is you can see on the map here the River Thames, and you can see to the left, apologies I can't point, but North Greenwich, which is where the O2 is, and then you can see the transport network around the site. So if those of you that are planners, designers, architects, or regen professionals, you will know that the challenge of delivering housing density and placemaking, you do require public transport accessibility. So the key to this site, you can see here, before we invested in railways and stations and transport infrastructure, was that it was difficult to get to. And you can see the journey times in particular to the nearest station were about half an hour walk. So investing in the strategic infrastructure was the first challenge, and that happened over a period of significant years in terms of accessing funding. And what just in a London context, next slide, please. London is and has always been part of a significant growth. And I just to give you some context on how Barking Riverside sits more generally in London, these are the top 15 micro towns within London, and there's around 100,000 homes here. And I'm sure the agency is investing in many of these projects in London. Barking Riverside sits just behind Old Oak and Park Royal, which is on the other side of London, in West London, looking at 25,000 homes and significant employment. But you can see that as far as investing in housing delivery, there aren't that many that are sort of north of 10,000 in London. So it makes sense, certainly in the strategic investment by Homes England, that you are focusing your investment on these types of large scale projects. Next slide, please. So what's the vision, and what is it that's happening? It's a master developer site for 20,000 homes with 65,000 square meters of commercial mixed use space. And it's also at the forefront of trying to be innovative with ecology, waste collection technologies, and all sorts of other investments that we're making in power and heat. It's a tricky site because it's an old power station site that needed to be refurbished. And so this image shows you what the potential of the site is looking to bring forward. And we are and have just submitted one of the largest planning applications in the country, which will take the number of homes originally at 10,000 up to 20,000. But within that, you will have new commercial space, health space, 7 schools, of which we've delivered 5 so far, and obviously the new railway station. And I'm going to show you some images of that as we go through. Next slide, please. So London plan level, this is an opportunity area, and the London plan defines opportunity areas as areas of London where you focus investment. And this is one of those across London where you're looking at employment, skills, jobs, homes, and also place. So you can see the image around the red line, which is the ownership of the site, is largely industrial. And to the east is a sustainable industries park, which is a mix of employment, storage, treatment, waste uses, and aggregate uses, similar to the west. And then there is what is quite a deprived part of Barking to the north, where there's been a significant lack of investment over the many decades. So coming into this site and investing heavily has been a significant challenge to bring those residents on board with change. Next slide, please. This was taken approximately sort of 15 years ago, and you'll see the change and the scale of change, but the opportunity that this type of land presents is significant, and there aren't many sites in London that can do this. Next slide, please. The original plan was to bring the Docklands Light Railway in, and you saw on one of the original slides that the DLR was stopping at Beckton and bring the DLR into this site. And this is a master plan done by Max Wan Architects back in 2007. And my job about 10 years ago was to look at that, because it was an £800 million investment, and change that investment strategy to something more affordable. And in the end, next slide, please. After many years sat on the Jubilee line, visiting the Treasury, talking to the DFT, to MHCLG about how you bring forward this type of investment, we settled on a new strategic investment in transport, which was the overground station to the middle of the site. And this new master plan was designed by Alex Lifshitz at LDS Architects, who worked with me quite early on to establish, okay, how can you bring 3 stations down to 1, but still hit the same public transport accessibility level. Next slide, please. Now, to spot the difference, I guess, this diagram is the application we've just submitted, which is taking the number from the previous slide, 10,800 up to 20,000. Now, where we've seen opportunity to grow the densities has been largely around the south of the site towards the river, where originally we planned much lower density, sort of two to 5, 6 stories, whereas now we're able to look at higher densities between 10 and 20 stories. So that said, there's some incredibly sensitive ecology that we've got to enhance, protect, and look after, and that's a big part of the unique element of this site. Next slide, please. I'll leave too much of this detail to Wasim and Duncan, but safe to say on the left-hand side, you can see the Section 106 that we've originally signed up to, which is certainly north of 244 million due to health and schools and things. But the key bits were 185 million for the train. We're funding the bus network, priming that bus network early when we haven't got residents, and then also junction improvements. But Homes England's funding on the right-hand side is a combination of 124 million and 56 million, which is helping us accelerate key bits of infrastructure. Next slide, please. So just before I bring in Rachel, I'm going to focus on the 2 bits of infrastructure that we've invested in at the front end, which is total almost £500 million worth of infrastructure in roads, railways, boats, schools, and land remediation. But this image just shows you this is facing east out of London, and you can see the station, the train station, in the middle of the site, and the land available that's going to come forward in the next few years. Next slide, please. And the key bit I mentioned at the start was about that transport interchange and public transport accessibility. So this slide links back to both the station and the boat. So you can now get the overground in and out of this site, or you can get the boat in and out of this site. So there's an all-day boat service now that's running, and I'll talk about that briefly now. Next slide, please. The square, a key part of what we're doing in East London is activating the square. So this is actually the station events that we hold annually, but also we put on various events throughout the year. And it's key in areas like this where you've got limited footfall. We've got about 6,000 residents, and when you're on site, getting access to amenity is the biggest challenge, bringing people to these spaces. So we have to curate a lot of these spaces quite heavily and invest heavily to get successful events running. And that's a challenge I think you probably see a lot across a lot of the places that you're working on. Next slide, please. The boat and the station give you journey times in and out of this site from what was, as I said earlier, half an hour, now down to about 6 minutes into Barking. So it's a massive shift in terms of accessibility. Next slide, please. And this particular investment was made with the support of Homes England and actually constructed in the Netherlands and brought over. So you can see the silver brow and the pontoon, which is where you get the boat from the site. And it took about a week and a half, 2 weeks to bolt that together once it arrived on site. And you can now get the boat. Next slide, please. I'll show you the routes to all the way to Putney, but the sort of real key connector is at Woolwich Arsenal, which is about 6 to 8 minutes from the site, and you can then walk up the hill to get onto the Elizabeth line, which then takes you to the West End in about half an hour. So these significant strategic investments help unlock the potential of this site. But it's not the only bit of investment that we've been doing. And Rachel's going to talk to you a little bit now about the other types of investment that we've been making early on and what that means in a London context. So Rachel, I'll hand over to you and then we'll pick up questions at the end. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, my name is Rachel Hickman. I'm Assistant Director for Investment and Operations at the Greater London Authority and also a Board Director and Co-Chair at Barking Riverside. So I'm just going to kind of take us back a little bit and talk about the context in London. And in London, our objective, in line with governments, is for us to be delivering 81,000 homes per year from 2026. That is more than double the current rates of delivery. And that just can't be done without early infrastructure delivery, which is why we're investing so significantly with our partners L&Q in things like Barking Riverside. The challenge in London is particularly acute. The higher costs of building and buying homes has meant that higher interest rates have had a magnified effect and have weakened the delivery pipeline. But that's also combined with the need to make London's large existing stock safe and energy efficient, and that's reduced local authority and housing association capacity to build new homes. But it's really important to remember it's not just about homes, it's about people and ensuring they have somewhere to live and to thrive. And the stark reality of the housing crisis in London can be seen through one of the statistics that 1 child in every 23 lives in temporary accommodation. That is at least 1 child in every single classroom. And it's just not acceptable, which is why housing delivery is our utmost priority. The Mayor has always wanted to wanted the GLA to take a proactive and interventionist approach in the delivery of homes in London, and Barking Riverside, even though it started before Sadiq's time, is an excellent example of that. It also aligns with the government's vision of delivering new towns and urban extensions. You saw from Matt's slide earlier kind of where we rank in delivering significant kind of new town in London. But the only reason we are able to deliver something the size of Barking Riverside is through partnership work and upfront investment in the infrastructure needed. Matt's already mentioned that we invested approximately £500 million in infrastructure. And as shareholders and investors, we're not going to see any return on that until about the 2040s. So it's about making sure that we have long-term patient capital and we take a lot of the delivery risks, which are obviously particularly acute at the moment with the land market where it is, which is what makes Barking Riverside deliverable. It's not easy, and sometimes we need to hold our nerve and make difficult choices, like the move about 10 years or so ago when we changed delivery partner and brought L&Q on board because they were more aligned with the vision of what we wanted to deliver in this area, but also the challenges we're facing at the moment. So this slide lists some of the infrastructure, both transport and social infrastructure that we've funded. So we've got primary school and community centre, we have co-op, pharmacy and a salon. There's the schools that Matt mentioned, one of which has got Ofsted outstanding, which is a brilliant achievement with the current ratings of the way Ofsted rates schools at the moment. And we've got lots of other things that open. The Thames Clipper Pier is a particular favourite of mine because I was there on the we did an opening day and we had invited 2 children from every primary school in Barking to come to the opening and have a trip on the Clipper. And what was just astounding was how many of them who have all lived in Barking Riverside had never even been down to the Thames and seen the Thames. So it's really critical that we create this amazing sense of place for residents. So far, this infrastructure has enabled the housing. It's fine, you can move on to the next slide. We've started this infrastructure, which enables 3,504 homes to be started, of which 40% are affordable. And of those homes, our partners L&Q and also Bellway have completed 2,500 homes, of which 36% are affordable. Last financial year, we completed 561 homes in this area, and this year we're expecting to complete approximately 450 homes this financial year. The real challenge we've got right now is how we can maintain that rate of delivery, and if not, and also accelerate it if at all possible. And Homes England can help with that through other delivery models, which we're exploring with them at the moment. This slide shows what we're going to be bringing, the plots that we're going to be bringing forward to market. The ones that are in turquoise are the ones that are available now. The funding from Homes England is critical in enabling us to build out the next stages of infrastructure to unlock those plots and increase the density to enable us to get to 20,000 homes. But as both Homes England and GLA, we have another role to play as well, which can be engaging and driving political change and legislation that enables delivery. So both through our work with our partners, but also by this type of direct delivery, we bring real tangible experience and evidence that we can use when we're engaging with colleagues in government to shape policy, legislation and funding to enable homes to be built. If you move on to the next slide, please, you can see from these images that the funding that Homes England has provided is going to allow us to progress these significant new open space, roads, utilities, and below ground infrastructure that can bring forward land at pace. It's not going to be looking, it's not looking really exciting in terms of the kind of infrastructure investment we're delivering. It's pipes and grounds, but it is absolutely vital for us to be able to unlock those sites around the roads. If you go to the next slide, that blue line there is where a lot of the work that Homes England funding will be spent on, the Brownfield Infrastructure Land Fund will be spent on to unlock those next plots. And if you move on to the next slide, thanks. But as I mentioned earlier, it's not just about the homes, it's about the people and the community we're creating. I'm incredibly proud of the work that Barking Riverside are doing for our residents, both in terms of the infrastructure and what that provides them with, but also in terms of the engagement, how we hear resident voice and how we generate a sense of community by getting the residents really involved in delivering events and running local businesses. On this slide here, you've got some testimonials from a couple of our residents. And if you look at any of the marketing materials that we have for Barking Riverside, they are real residents who are involved in marketing the site as well to create that sense of place. There's so much more I could talk about in terms of Barking Riverside, especially around the engagement with residents and how we're using them to run our community interest company and things like that. But I will leave it there for now and hand over to, I believe, our Homes England colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel and Matt. We'll hand over now to Duncan and Wasim, who have been leading the work alongside other teams in the agency with Barking Riverside, and then we'll come to the questions. And thank you to those who are asking questions in the chat, and we'll try and pick up as many as possible while sticking to time after this. Duncan, Wasim, over to you.
I want to click on one slide, and Wasim, you're going to kick off? We lost Wasim.
Testing. Hello, can anyone hear me?
Yeah, can now, Wasim. Yeah.
Sorry. Teams conveniently kicked me out. Shall I cover this half of the slide?
Yeah, go. Yeah.
So very quickly, I'm Wasim Jim. I head up the infrastructure loans team in the south, and I think what we wanted to do here is just talk a bit more broadly about what we do and what we kind of see in infrastructure projects that we fund. So on the left-hand side of the slide, these are the kind of the characteristics of infrastructure projects that we see and invest in. So typically they're large, complex projects. Certainly from a loan side, we'd look at sort of 500 homes plus, but we can do smaller schemes, and that's particularly true on the grant side of investments that we make. And our objective is to unlock or accelerate delivery. We have a brownfield first approach, so that's where we like to focus our funding. We support, our funding typically supports master developers like Barking Riverside Limited, deliver critical and placemaking infrastructure. One of the key things that our product does is it provides long-term and patient capital, which is needed. We at Homes England have a long-term view on the investment made and the sort of horizon needed to look at investment to see housing delivery. And finally, we're keen to make to see value for money. So we're keen to make our investment in, but to also leverage in the private sector involvement. Either that's through the direct delivery of infrastructure or through creating service land parcels or platforms for housing development or direct housing delivery. The question then becomes, when we look at infrastructure project, is it loan or is it grant? And I think Duncan will highlight some of the things that we look at.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name's Duncan Innes. I'm an assistant director in the infrastructure grants team at Homes England. And Barking Riverside is a really good example of a mixed loan and grant intervention. Roughly numbers are 94 million of loan, 30 million of grant. But the critical point, as you've already heard, that there's so much upfront infrastructure required on a big project like this that it really prejudices the cash flow. It's really hard to fund. So what grant does in this context is unlock further funding. So the grant addresses that upfront viability problem that then means the project is fundable, in this case through a Homes England loan, but it could be other commercial funding, sort of market facing funding, as it were. As I think has been mentioned in passing, loan and grant is available to the private sector, and grant is also available to the public sector, but for obvious reasons Homes England doesn't loan to the public sector. And whether it's a loan or a grant, the loan is on effectively commercial terms, so it's repayable in the usual way together with interest and fees. And the grant doesn't have to be recoverable, but the grant agreement will always have a recoverability trigger. So if things go really well and the project suddenly looks a lot more viable than it did when the grant first came in, there'll be a threshold above which any surplus Homes England will share in. So if we flick on to the next slide, and then Wasim, I think you're going to talk to that.
Yeah. Thank you. So when it came in the case of Barking Riverside, kind of thinking back to sort of types of projects we get involved in, large complex projects have meaningful impact in local areas. Barking Riverside was clearly an example of that, where we could unlock housing capacity and accelerate the remaining 16,500 homes. Despite Barking Riverside being in a good position of resolving the transport issues, but by installing the new overground station, the need for long-term infrastructure financing just doesn't exist in the high street. The risk appetite is outside of your typical lender, and that's where we at Homes England can sort of step in. So in the case of the loan, we put forward this year of £94 million. It's a 10-year term in which we allow Barking Riverside to invest the loan money, develop cash receipts from land sales, from the direct delivery side of things, and then recycle that to continue reinvestment into the site. And then we will patiently wait until the end of the 10 years to ultimately be repaid the loan, the principal loan, interest, and any fees. No other lender in the market has that sort of same capability or appetite. Next slide, please. Duncan?
Again, yeah, so I'll pick up. I think you've probably already heard, but just to reinforce, the grant is for infrastructure purposes. It isn't able to support the delivery of homes themselves. That is at least under the brownfield infrastructure and land funding programme we're currently working with. Future programmes may well treat housing as a form of infrastructure, which I think many commentators is the way it should think. It's the way it should be viewed. But just a couple of points of detail, really, just for those who are interested. I mentioned there's always a recoverability trigger, and that's always either in relation to an internal rate of return threshold or a profit threshold. The choice between the two depends on the nature of the project and if it's a long multi-phase stream. But similar to the loan, we're very patient about grant recovery. On Barking, the calculation as to whether grant is recoverable won't be until the early 2040s. The purpose of the grant is, as I said a few minutes ago, to unlock a viability problem and allow the developer, in this case Barking Riverside Limited, to move forward and get the land ready, unlock housing, accelerate housing. In terms of the numbers, Matt referred to the new planning application that Barking Riverside Limited are making which brings the total up to 20,000 homes. So as well as accelerating the 16,500 homes, the grant is also unlocking an additional number through the densification of the site from its existing master plan number up to the 20,000 homes. So in Homes England terms, that's a virtuous circle of both acceleration and additionality. And those are the sort of things we look for. Those are the sort of KPIs and outputs that we need to use to drive value for money and contribute to the policy objective of new homes on brownfield housing. So I think that's us. I think it's back to you, Neil, for Q&A.
Thank you both. And we'll do a quick Q&A. I'm cautious of time, so we won't be able to get to everybody's questions in the chat, unfortunately, but hopefully we can agglomerate some of those questions and get some real learning for you in it. So just picking up, Matt, with some of the first questions in there. This site is obviously a very heavily brownfield site and next to the waterfront. Can you talk us through how you've dealt with some of the issues relating to those, what problems they've caused and how you and the team have addressed them?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Can you hear and see me all right? So the site requires quite extensive earthworks and land raising, and that's due to the flood requirements of the Environment Agency. So we have, with your support, we're just about to let an earthworks package which is going to raise the land to a minimum of 8 meters above AOD, so that in the event of a catastrophic flood, the site is protected and above flood levels. So that's quite a significant investment that we have to do, and we've done a lot of that work already. So hopefully that gives some clarity on that, Neil.
Great, Matt. Thank you very much. And actually, I'll come back to you again. The scheme is a significant scale, and looking through the images, there's a lot of apartments and high density buildings. Can you talk to the kind of 10-year mix, the housing mix? Are there family houses here, or is it all apartments? And how have you dealt with high density in what is quite a low-rise area of London?
Yeah, it's I mean, there's a couple of things to say, that, and it's certainly worth a visit to come and see the site. Actually, all 334 of you on the call, you're welcome to speak to Neil about coordinating a visit there. Come and see it, because the scale of the River Thames at this particular point is significant. So there's a couple of things: urban realm and placemaking design. The river has the ability to accommodate, because it's one of London's largest open spaces, the River Thames, and it's completely underutilized, certainly in this part of London. So we wanted to get on the River Thames and be able to accommodate the scale. And when you look on the other side of the river, or if you go up and down the River Thames on the boat, you'll see the varying building heights and scale and massing that you get across the Thames it ranges significantly. And we take the same approach. We treat the site with respect in terms of the ecology and the requirements to protect the habitats and the views. But there is an opportunity to do taller buildings. So we are proposing to do tall buildings up and down what is 2 kilometres of riverfront. But also in the earlier phases that we've done on the first phase of the project, where there's 1,000 homes, the majority of homes there are split between apartments and townhouses, and there are a lot of townhouses on the earlier phases when the densities at the time weren't possible without transport intervention. So a lot of the family homes have been delivered at a front end, and going forward, in order for this scheme to optimize the delivery of homes, we're pivoting now to apartment-based delivery. But that also requires us to do significant amount of open space to accommodate the community that's going to be living here. So we've got multiple parks, 2 kilometres of riverfront walks. We've also got, as I mentioned earlier, we have to do a significant number of schools. So those have all been front loaded. So houses and townhouses will be part of this project going forward as well, but it will be dependent on each phase as we look and design to make sure we optimise housing delivery.
Great, thank you very much. Again, very cautious of time, so we'll skip through. But speaking to some of the speakers, they'll hopefully respond to some of the questions in the chat as well. Rachel, coming particularly from the GLA perspective, how are you looking to maintain the speed of delivery and the pace of delivery within a housing crisis with private sector developers who do tend to manage their own pipelines based on absorption? And how is that impactful within the affordable mix and the affordable nature of the project?
Thanks, Neil. Grouping some questions together makes it a tricky one to answer, but I'll give it a go. So the way Barking Riverside kind of deal is set up is that we have both L&Q and Bellway as our key delivery partners who bring the plots of land forward and also the affordable housing forward. But we do have some scope for bringing in additional partners, which is what we're doing at the moment, engaging with the market. And I think that's absolutely critical, is trying to drive that delivery but through diversification of what we can see on site, and that's what helps us deliver so many homes in the area in 1 year. I think the other benefit we have is that Barking is one of the, if not the cheapest area in London to purchase a house, so that does keep a lot of interest. And having put the infrastructure in, it makes it much more connected and therefore much more welcoming, and people want to move there now because they are better connected. The affordable housing delivery, I think when it was originally the original planning had affordable housing, I'm going to look at Matt now and hopefully get this right, 35% affordable housing, and we are, as the Mayor has in the London plan, we are striving for 50% on public sector land, which this is through our involvement. So we are aiming to push that affordable housing delivery up. And I think we have historically seen in a kind of downturn market that affordable housing delivery enables that counter-cyclical delivery. But at the moment, that is not quite what we're seeing. It is a lot more challenging, especially with delivering Section 106 homes. And that's, I think, where the GLA has a role to play in terms of the engagement with government around trying to enable our partners in the affordable housing market to bring forward delivery, whether that's through freeing up their ability to invest in new housing stock, negotiating on the new affordable homes programme and what will come after the current homes programme. I know there are several questions on tenure. I'm not going to go too deeply into it because it then just kind of becomes about numbers. The Mayor's priority is social rent accommodation, but we also have to deliver in the within the funding parameters that we have available, and so a lot of the funding has gone towards shared ownership properties in the area, and they are very attractive for people to purchase, but it's about trying to find that right balance and balancing the demand with the funding that's available and all of those sorts of things.
Thank you very much. I know there are more questions coming in. If I can encourage our speakers to answer those questions directly in the chat, we'll move on now to Bristol Temple Quarter. Steve, if you're okay to put the slide deck back again. And thank you again to our speakers for Barking Riverside. We'll skip forward now to Bristol Temple Quarter. And Bristol Temple Quarter is a partnership between a number of public sector partners, and welcome Stephen Peacock, Chief Executive of the Combined Authority, to talk about Bristol Temple Quarter and the ambitions there.
Thank you, Neil, and hello everybody. Just checking you can hear me okay. I'm going to assume the answer is yes. Thanks, Neil. So yes, Stephen Peacock, I'm Chief Executive of the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority. It's good to be with you here today. Just briefly, a little bit about myself. I have been in the role just under 6 months here in Bristol, prior to which I was the Chief Executive of Bristol City Council. And a long time ago, I worked in economic development and regeneration in the former regional development agencies, but I've also been a partner at Grant Thornton and with a background in technology and international energy. So yes, so I'm coming at this very much from the perspective of place, Bristol and the West of England, this vital investment and this great partnership between ourselves and Homes England and other partners. Next slide, please. So just a quick history of how we got here with Temple Quarter. This has been going on a long time. As with so many major regeneration programs, they have a long history. And depending on your time scale, and I remember when I was at the RDA, in fact, in 2004, we were talking about this project. The Temple Quarter Enterprise Zone actually dates back to 2012 when it was established. And our first formal meeting as a strategic board with the partners you see on screen here was in 2017. We signed a memorandum of understanding, all four partners, Bristol City Council, West of England Combined Authority, Network Rail and Homes England. And it's very important also to recognise that it's not just ourselves who form the basis of this. There's a vital partnership at the heart of Temple Quarter with the University of Bristol, who have made an anchor investment of over £500 million in a new enterprise campus right at the heart of this. Indeed, next door, our next door neighbour but one is L&G, who also have a significant mixed use scheme in development. So this is an enormous and multifaceted partnership that's going to make a huge difference to our region. Next slide, please. So how does the involvement of Homes England look? Well, I think what's very interesting about this project, this photograph is us, a number of us standing outside a new entrance to a station. And that funding was through Homes England from MHCLG. So it's important that it's, infrastructure money, as our previous speakers were saying. This is actually about using MHCLG Homes England money to deliver new entrances to a station, and then for that to then unlock land for housing, commercial space and public spaces around the station. And I think, those of us who've worked on this project and the similar projects know that there is a huge willingness in organisations like Homes England to really be creative about how you unlock housing. But it can be quite challenging, can't it, to talk to other bits of government and ensure they understand the join up and the connect between, a mission that is about housing primarily, and recognising Homes England's mission has substantially evolved over the last 2 to 3 years. But it is nonetheless a good example of how you can get the machinery of government to work in creative ways if you demonstrate consistency, a commitment to partnership working, and make the case as strongly and concisely as we were all able to do. And that includes Network Rail, vitally, as well as obviously the city and regional authorities here and Homes England. This eastern entrance was a really interesting example of partnership working. Where I currently work, the combined authority actually forward funded the work that was needed to be done on this ahead of the formal decision by MHCLG Treasury and Homes England to award the funding, and that enabled us to get rail possession at a vital window in the Network Rail programme. So without that, we would have probably been talking 2 to 3 years still before we'd have got this built. And this entrance is right next to that university campus, which again took a huge amount of collaboration with things like compounds, because there were multiple building sites right next to each other. So that's a great example of both taking a risk, taking a calculated risk around forward funding something before all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, in order to be able to take opportunities in a programme that's multiply complex, and as a result of which there we stand proudly before the new station. Next slide, please. Bit of strategic context. Bristol is a city I'm sure you all know. It makes a positive contribution to the GDP of the country, one of only 2 core cities to do so, but it's a very divided city. There's acute deprivation, nearly 10-year healthy life expectancy gap between areas less than 2 miles apart. It has a very significant acute housing crisis, 20,000 people on the waiting list for a house, and massive population growth. We also have a shortage of industrial land, and this area to the southeast of the shaded map is St Philip's Marsh, and that is actually the biggest area of growth for our Temple Quarter programme, but it's also the area that provides the largest amount of industrial space in our city. So we have to be able to be very creative about enabling mixed use development in an area which creates what you might call working class jobs, certainly the foundational economy of the future. So Bristol is space constrained, 42 square miles. So we have to make the best use of every square mile we have. Obviously, at the heart of this is a railway station, Temple Meads, I should say, and that is at the heart of our regional transport aspirations, which is will see our station's capacity grow from 9 million to 21 million passenger journeys a year. So it's really important that the capacity of the station is built into the heart of our regeneration programme. And it's also important to note that this is at the heart of the new growth agenda, the local growth plan. This is the document we're working on along with all mayoral combined authorities for the new government, is all about how we really make sure the West of England, which is the most productive mayoral combined authority in terms of economic output and is set to grow the fastest of any mayoral combined authority, can continue to be the engine of growth. And we've identified housing and transport as our two key enablers, or you might say inhibitors, to unlock tremendous economic growth. So there's a tremendous opportunity, a lot of excitement right now about the potential for Temple Quarter and other sites, particularly in South Gloucestershire, to really drive forward that growth. Next slide, please. So just a quick word on the partnership itself. We created an LLP to drive the programme. This is about formalising the arrangements, giving the market one entity to deal with, so that they make it easy for us to make it easy as possible for the market to engage with us. We're looking for a new chair and we're procuring our partner early next year. Next slide. And this is my final slide, but just to say, the only thing I wanted to say is the one final thing I want to mention is that we have a critical piece of infrastructure, March 25, September 25, that Southern Gateway is the next critical piece in the Temple Quarter jigsaw. But I will now hand over to colleagues to take you through the Homes England part of the story. So Rosa, I think.
Thank you, Stephen. Over to Rosa within Homes England.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Good morning, everyone. I'm Rosa Payne. I head up the Markets, Partners and Places team in the Southwest. MPP for short. It's a bit of a mouthful. So Stephen's really helpfully set the scene in terms of the journey that we've been on with BTQ. And I just thought it's worth pausing here and spending a couple of minutes highlighting the multiple roles that Homes England have taken in the project, and also just the kind of long-term approach that is, quite specific to BTQ at this point in time. So in terms of place-based delivery, Neil touched on this earlier. MPP leads on place-based delivery. So we are a multidisciplinary team who identify, lead on and provide support to large-scale, complex and innovative projects that usually, frankly, require multiple interventions, cross-government and cross-agency working. So for BTQ, we lead on the relationship with the partners locally, as well as managing the multifunctional team within Homes England. And that just ensures that we can continue to bring the skills and knowledge and programmes from across the agency as we move to the delivery phases of the project. Secondly, we're a landowner. We've got fairly significant land interests at BTQ. So our estates management team have a long-term role, obviously ensuring sites are safe and well managed, but critically on BTQ, also working closely with the partners to facilitate that shared objective around delivery, ensuring we've got appropriate leases and license in place that support that. Alongside this, our disposals team are working with the LLP to look at transferring our key sites into the LLP, and together with the land being transferred from the other LLP partners, this will be the key to enabling comprehensive delivery on phase 1. Stephen touched earlier on the infrastructure grant, so we put in 94.7 million in 2022. The long-term management of this sits with our infrastructure grant project management colleagues, and they ensure the progress against delivery commitments, do all of the good stuff like authorising funding drawdowns, dealing with variation requests, but essentially they have a really important long-term role in the project, ensuring the grant-funded infrastructure is delivered, and then going beyond that to monitoring the contracted outputs and making sure all the housing that we wanted to unlock gets unlocked. And finally, as one of the LLP shareholders, our product equity and partnerships team have a long-term role in managing and monitoring the LLP's performance and also ensuring appropriate shareholder protection for Homes England. So that's a super quick whistle-stop tour. I don't want to take up too much time because there's lots of interesting things for Karen to talk about at BTQ, but hopefully that's just brought to life a bit our approach to place-based working and how we can join up packages of support for our priority projects. And I'm hoping that given the audience, that might spark ideas about how we can support you in your places. I'm going to hand over to Karen now to talk about the very interesting BTQ project in a bit more detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosa. Karen, over to you.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Rosa. So my name's Karen Mercer and I'm the Chief Exec of Bristol Temple Quarter. In terms of my background, it's regeneration and delivery of these type of schemes. I was the Director of Regeneration at Hounslow, and prior to that, I was the Delivery Director for Brent Crosstown for Barnet Council, another major regen scheme in London. If we can go on to the next slide. So in front of you shows the extent of Bristol Temple Quarter. It extends to 135 hectares, which is about the size of 190 football pitches over two distinct phases. The first phase is centred around Temple Mead Station, as Stephen and Rosa has advised. That's a Grade 1 listed building. Everyone will have heard of Brunel, and it's one of 9 grade listed UK stations in the UK. The multicoloured sites around there shows the extent of public sector ownership, which is within Homes England ownership, Network Rail, as well as Bristol City Council, which at the moment is currently being invested into the LLP. And then we can also see there Temple Island, which is the LNG scheme that Stephen referred to earlier, and then also Silverthorne Lane, which is a private sector-led scheme that will be delivering a new secondary school. And then you see the extent of St Philip's Marsh, which is our phase 2, which we'll come on to shortly in a bit more detail. We go on to the next slide. So, this is very much about people. We are taking a place-making approach. At the moment, we are currently massive planning for phase 1 around the station. It's not just a housing or infrastructure project. It is very much placemaking, and we want to create a place that works for local people and the region, as well as visitors and workers. Currently, the station area lacks facilities, nowhere to dwell, spend time, get food, and we're wanting to work closely with Network Rail and using the monies provided by Homes England to invest in the station. The phase 1 is also looking at how we resolve issues around creating a civic heart with a focus on connectivity and activation. At the moment, the station provides a barrier between St Philip's and the town centre, and we're looking at ways over how we make sure that people can easily move around on foot, as well as by public transport and cycling. Connectivity in and out of the area is central to our approach and wanting to make sure we connect back in. We have been working with the local community as well. We've very much created our vision for place, which is a handbook to create a place that is for and for the people of Bristol. And in that, we have engaged with schools, the local community, residents, businesses to make sure we are creating a place and building upon the development framework that's been endorsed by Bristol City Council. If we go on to the next slide. So, sorry, it's not quite the order that I had. So as part of this, inclusive growth is critical to everything we do. We're currently establishing a social value charter that is looking at how we can approach with developers throughout the regeneration area to make sure we're trying to deliver meaningful interventions that are greater than the sum of the parts. We are engaging with the community. It's important that we create a place that's right for Bristol, as well as the region, as well as on a national scale in terms of the long-term growth investment that Stephen referred to earlier. We are opening a BTQ hub in the next couple of weeks to have an on-site presence for the community engagement, and also an opportunity to provide information and access to skills and employment opportunities. We're taking an open, deliberate approach to community engagement, engaging people early in the process and aiming to co-create, but also being honest about what we can deliver, because it's really important that people, Stephen mentioned earlier, this is a long time coming. We need to make sure that people believe in these places and we're actually making change quickly. In terms of St. Philip's Marsh, there's 160 businesses within there. It is a major growth area, and we have been out, spoken to all the businesses, and we're looking at ways that we can help them grow long-term and business retention, and also help them relocate, given that with this also be providing substantial residential. Sustainability, again, given the climate change, given where we are, it's important that this is embedded in everything we do, working closely with businesses as well to make sure that they are taking the same approach. We go on to the next slide. Meeting our housing needs. So Bristol, very much like London, suffers from a significant housing shortage. The university is now, you can see the picture there on the right. It's now well advanced. It will open in 2026. The fact that we are sort of investing in the infrastructure around the station in the new entrances has stimulated the market. There is really strong momentum across phase 1 and also phase 2. And there's a high number of student accommodation in light of the student coming on board. And in fact, if you look at the development that's coming across, all of that is actually student accommodation and not meeting the housing need that is needed within Bristol. None of the private sector schemes at the moment across BTQ are policy compliant either in terms of the local plan. So we are working together with Bristol City Council, Homes England and the Combined Authority to look at putting in place a housing strategy that looks at how we can make sure that we're delivering the social housing and range of affordable housing needed for the people of Bristol and across the region. We go on to the next slide. Yeah, so we are working on how to improve Temple Mead Station. The 94 million is being spent on improvements to the station, but also importantly to unlock land for development. On the top right, you will see that is what we call the northern entrance. That pretty much looks like a back door, but 75% of passengers come out of Temple Mead Station and is using that route. And then also on the top right, you will see the Midland Shed, which is a fantastic building and it's currently used car park. We are looking to how we can invest there and create a retail workspace, enhancing the arrival point into Bristol Temple Meads that can make a destination, but also interact with the wider development that will happen immediately outside. So here is phase 2. You can see there that it's a mix of land ownership, many businesses, 160, as I mentioned. It is the major area after phase 1, which will deliver the bulk of the housing that we need across Bristol and the region, as well as providing the employment space. It does have its challenges. Pretty much most of it is under flood risk, land assembly, fragmented ownership. There's large amounts of speculative investment going on at this moment in time. Prices are incredibly high in terms of price per square foot. Infrastructure is lacking. There is no public transport across St. Philip's Marsh, so how we access jobs and create a safe space is really important, as well as lack of community facilities. We are just started our phase 2 master plan in terms of putting together the baseline data, and early next year we'll be starting to look at options over how this area can come forward and what is the strategic framework. I think it's really important to mention that this is going to be, many developers will bring this area forward, and it's really important that collectively we provide that framework to provide the safe routes, the public transport, deal with the improve on the flooding to create a place where people will want to live and work. And then we're just about to start a employment land and intensification strategy. And as part of that, we'll be identifying sort of opportunities where we can look at how the businesses across phase 2 can actually grow, but on a sort of a smaller footprint, as in order to be able to release land for the residential development. you go on to the next slide. So what are we going to do in the first 5 years? So we have our phase 1 master plan, which we have developed. We're embedding the delivery of the B2Q vision and objectives into our business plan. We will oversee the grant-funded phase 1 infrastructure works. The eastern entrance completed earlier this year. As Stephen mentioned, we will be starting the Southern Gateway building next year. That will allow the relocation of regulated station parking into a new multimodal transport facility, which will have direct access into the station, thereby releasing land for residential and commercial to come forward. And we were talking about sort of partnership. So we've been working through sort of public sector partnership. We will be securing a development partner next year to be joining us, and they will be looking at how we deliver a comprehensive regeneration across phase 1, and also supporting us in land assembly as well, because whilst the public sector own a significant amount of sites, there are further acquisitions that we will need to do in order to be able to deliver the whole of the comprehensive regeneration of phase 1. We will be developing the phase 2 master plan and the outline business case, resolving issues on flooding, transport, and providing the framework for our private sector partner, as well as other developers, to be bringing that forward. And then also overseeing the delivery program-wide integration of inclusive growth, employment and skills, and construction and logistics. Go on to the next slide. So in terms of lessons learned, I have been on the project now for 2 years. We've been setting up the LLP. I think it's important to recognise that it takes time to set up vehicles such as this. It's important that partners remain focused on outcomes rather than the process. And there is a danger sometimes of getting into the weeds and not looking at the bigger picture of what we're collectively trying to achieve. It does challenge existing processes. It's changing the way that we work. That does require flexibility and trust. And I think it's probably fair to say that the LLP has stretched ways of working across all 4 partners, but important to recognise that, it's been a really good working relationship, but has tested us. But it does, it shows the strength of the partnership that's there in order to be able to resolve issues as and when they arise. For public sector partners, it has been complicated, or it is complicated. It does add complexity, but also there's a great opportunity to be able to think strategically about the bigger picture. And lastly, I think it's worth reflecting that it's really important that organisations such as this are property capitalised and have the funds to deliver. I'll leave it there, I think, Neil, and hand back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of our speakers about Bristol Temple Quarter. We are almost on time, which is a miracle. So I will move over to quick questions and answers with the team. Before I do, Karen, I've just been listening to your presentation and realised we didn't actually talk to housing numbers on phase 1 and phase 2. Would you be able to just illustrate the difference in housing numbers between the 2 phases?
No, sure. So in phase 1, it's about 2,500 residential homes, of which probably half of that will be delivered by the public sector and others within private sector. In terms of phase 2, we think substantial student accommodation is underway, but probably about 8,000 homes is what we're aiming at. But there is potentially the ability to be through design to be able to increase those numbers further, and that's what we're using the master plan work to do, to really test what are the options we can have moving forward.
Okay, great. And I'll encourage people to ask questions in the chat. And before we do, one key reflection. So Matt talked earlier about Barking Riverside and how Barking Riverside had to go through various iterations to get infrastructure in place, and in turn that unlocked development, whereas Bristol Temple Quarter already has one of the most populous train stations and certainly the most connected within the region. How have you found having infrastructure in place already has shaped the vision and shaped the way you work? What are the benefits and difficulties in that space, Karen?
In terms of having infrastructure
already there, as opposed to having to bring it in, what are the differences you've reflected on there?
Yeah, I think phase 1 there is infrastructure there. which is good. But also the sites that we have are quite piecemeal. And it's one of the questions we have is how do we knit those sites together to create place? So whilst there are the roads, there is the station, which is absolutely brilliant but it's how we then bring development in and allow people to move around. And it's also looking at how, in some instances, roads can be barriers too. So how do we improve crossing points? So whilst it's there are still challenges, and there's further infrastructure that we will need to do to be able to knit these sites together to create a place. And then I think we're probably on phase 2, we're probably very similar to Matt in that sense. There is a lot more infrastructure that we need to identify substantial funding for, working with public and private sector partners to make sure that we can deliver the place.
Great, thanks. And I know Ian had answered a question and Stephen's come back on it, but Stephen, I don't know whether you wanted to talk more to the role the different public sector partners have played, because it is effective. The LLP is a public sector group of organisations, each playing a different role.
Yes, as I've just mentioned, obviously, well, 3 of us, the council, Homes England and Network Rail, obviously landowners. Network Rail is subject to slightly different restrictions and a different governance arrangements. So they're in the process of considering how to do what we've already basically done from the Bristol and Homes England, which is effectively redline the site and to ensure that the land that sits in there that's in our ownership is in effect made available, and that was a significant piece of the jigsaw, certainly from Bristol City Council point of view, because like so many authorities, its balance sheet cannot sustain a sort of a capital investment, but it does, as I say, have a significant land holding. So that was a critical piece. I think the political and LPA matters, that every city and every unitary authority will have to consider, took a while to work through in terms of scrutiny and political support. There was a cross-parties political support to enable the LLP, which, as it were, exists in Bristol, but is therefore somewhat different to your conventional council-owned entity, from a planning and political line of sight point of view. It took a while. The idea of an independent chair and board and making sure that the powers that were granted to the entity were just enough to get the market the certainty it needed, but not too much to give a political challenge. We learned, I think, from what worked elsewhere. Karen obviously talked about her example earlier, and Brent Cross, and obviously other mayoral development or urban development corporations around the country have given us a good menu to choose from. So we were well advised. But I suppose that was the biggest piece of the jigsaw that we had to manage. And we've had a change of administration in Bristol, and there has been no let up in the support that's coming from the council, which is an indication I think we got that about right.
Great, thank you. Karen, Adrian's asked in the chat about St Philip's Marsh, which is low value employment land, and how you looking to maintain a good balance of mix of opportunities for employment space and jobs within the area.
Yeah, and that's going to be the challenge of our phase 2 master plan and working through the options. It's really important that we retain as many jobs and businesses within St Philip's Marsh as we can, which is where we're looking at the intensification study that we're doing at the moment. We also have the university too. We have science, the quantum elements of the sort of the higher end jobs, I guess, on that, but working very much with the university and also the West of England Combined Authority and on the innovation side over how can we create a balanced range of jobs. It's really important to us that somebody who goes to Silverthorne Lane School can ultimately get a job within St Philip's Marsh and stay long term. So how do we create curate the right place to enable that to happen, which is where the focus on our inclusive growth is so critically important, to ensure that it's embedded in every work stream and everything we do, and that also we secure a long-term partner who shares our values on that, as well as working closely with the Combined Authority, the University of Bristol, as well as the other universities across the region as well, to create the right place and access
to jobs.
Is it worth
just adding to say that the jobs at the moment are land hungry jobs, so they're very low density employment. So we think there's every opportunity to retain the kind of that foundational economy, but just with a better use of the land we have.
Yeah, and that's the purpose of the study that we're doing now, to create an example to show that actually can be delivered.
Great, thank you very much. And reflecting on some of the comments previously, how much of a risk do you think that Bristol Temple Quarter Station, if employment spaces are created next to it, creates a risk of a dormitory style development? Or how much do you think it would be integrated with, how much work would you do to integrate it with surrounding communities, not just the business spaces, but also the housing that's nearby?
So I think the answer to that is twofold, I think. So firstly, the LLP and partners are working closely with Network Rail to establish the governance approach to actually making sure we are taking a holistic view across the area rather than just looking at the station itself. So, the Network Rail are investing in the station. They're providing new retail units as well as workspace units, and we need to make sure that they align with our overall vision for the wider area. So again, sort of making sure we're joined up is really important. And then also accessibility is really important. We've spent quite a bit of time in our master plan looking at how people can access the station, and then also working with the Combined Authority and linking to the wider schemes that Stephen was talking about in South Gloucestershire. Sort of how do we create a place where people will come to Temple Meads and St Philip's Marsh and stay and live, can access outside of Bristol itself in terms of jobs, and also vice versa. So there's a lot to do, but it's very much that's where we want to end up. And it's partnership working collectively to make that happen with the right type of jobs and the right type of homes.
Great, thank you very much. If there's no other reflections, then we'll move back to the last couple of slides. Thank you very much to the Bristol Temple Quarter team. Reflections on today, and I think from our perspective, it's been a very helpful session, and thank you for your questions and comments. Infrastructure is key, and so is the social mix and the social value of bringing forward those schemes together. Homes England, we are actively looking for partners who display the kind of strong leadership that Rachel and Stephen and others in the public sector can bring to this kind of project. And I hope you've seen that the agency can offer multiple types of intervention, from grants along to facilitation to unblocking, to bring those forward. But critically, and we all know this, major regeneration schemes are complicated. They cross multiple cycles, they cross multiple political elements, and they need long-term commitment. And it's people like us, me, you, and everybody on this call who can provide that leadership. This video will be uploaded to YouTube, and will provide an opportunity for to refresh your understanding there. We'll pick up questions from the chat and we'll take that forward from there. I think Matt has offered to every 300 people a visit to Barking Riverside. I'm sure he will regret that later, but by all means, either come and see Bristol or come and see Barking Riverside and see what the agency can do and can help you to deliver. Thank you very much to everyone for your time. And I want to say thank you very much to all of the speakers today. It's been a great session. There's been a lot to learn. And thank you very much for your time and trouble. And thank you for attending today's session. It's great to be able to share the message with wider with everyone. Take care.